progress to report. We've made historic investments in the development of clean energy to support hundreds of thousands of jobs, and have doubled the amount of electricity we get from wind and solar energy. We've developed fuel efficiency standards that will nearly double fuel economy for passenger cars by 2025, cut greenhouse gas emissions from our vehicles by half, and save drivers more than $8,000 at the pump. Our dependence on foreign oil is the lowest it's been in 16 years. We're importing an average of 2.6 million fewer barrels of oil and petroleum products every day.
Are you an environmentalist for Obama? Well, if you were, you would already know that that is the tailor-made message that the president has for his constituency of environmentalists, touting his administration's efforts vis-a-vis solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars, and all of that good stuff. And this is Power Play. Welcome back, Internet. And here's the problem for the president as it relates to his re-election campaign and the environment. We were just talking in the previous segment about the slice and dice micro-targeted strategy that they're using. One of those subgroups that the president's very interested in keeping a hold of are environmentalists. He wants them giving money. He wants them involved. He wants them active. But at the same time, in his outreach, especially in the Rust Belt and states that were very tough for the Democrats in 2010, he doesn't want to be seen as a guy who is some sort of an environmental crusader. It's a tough spot, so let's see how it's going to affect that old presidential election. Helping us to do that, welcome back Doug Thornell. He is a former spokesman for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He was right-hand guy to Chris Van Hollen. He's a Democratic strategist, and again, we'll stipulate, as we did with Mary Catherine Hand, PBD. Also PBD is Ford O'Connell. He's the chairman of Civic Forum PAC. He is a Republican strategist. They both love America. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen.
Great to be here.
Always great to be here.
Okay, good. He one-upped you with always. Okay, guys, so the question is this, and I'll start with you, Doug.
Yep.
So the president is trying to hit the sweet spot here, but the EPA not really helping him out, because he's trying to say he has a sensible approach. He's going to fight global warming, but he's going to do it in ways that aren't bad for the economy. Right. And then this guy from the EPA, you remember this guy that comes out and says that he's a Roman centurion crucifying oil and gas corporations.
Right.
How does the president hit this sweet spot?
Well, I think the president has a pretty good record on the environment, also on energy. I mean, the attacks from the right on the EPA and on the president's environmental record are kind of things that aren't surprising. It's something that the Republican Party has been doing for quite a long time. I think if you look at the president's record, though, compared to George Bush at a very similar point in time in their administrations, Bush actually has approved 5% more regulations than the president. So, and that's a Bloomberg study that was done several months ago.
Is that true?
Yeah, I have it right here.
5% more? Does it quantify or qualify the nature? Because maybe he was rewriting existing regulations. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, it was the study looked at overall regulations.
Okay.
They looked at also the effect on the economy. I think the other thing about the EPA to remember is that for a while, once upon a time, the EPA was not some demonized group. I mean, I want to read you a quote which says, "Yeah, I brought it. I said so. The quote is: "Preservation of our environment is not a liberal or conservative challenge. It's common sense. Though this is a time of budget constraints, I have requested for EPA one of the largest percentage budget increases of any agency." Guess who that was?
Ronald Reagan.
There you go.
Never would have guessed.
So here's my only point. I think, first of all, if you look at the end, I think that if you look at what the president has done on the environment, he has a good record on fuel efficiency standards, on drilling. We're drilling more than we ever have. But he does have to thread a needle with places like Ohio and Michigan and make it look as though that it is balanced, because I think it is. Romney has an issue with suburban voters and women who really do like protecting the environment. So I think it's going to be a juggling act for Ford.
Energy is going to be the president's Achilles heel if he loses in November, because some of his environmental regulations are actually causing the $4 gas price. Okay, oil's $2.50 basically a gallon, but let's just say $4 just for the sake of argument.
We'll stipulate $3.87.
Exactly,
it's going down. It is going down.
Taxes and basically environmental regulations and refining regulations are what are adding to that. 20 cents here and there in the gas price is whether or not people eat. okay? And also his regulations are hurting small business. So frankly, if people don't see a way out of their current situation, the president's going to wind up losing because he's really basically pushing a form of environmental fascism.
Well, I agree that
environmental fascism.
Environmental fascism.
I think
then Ronald Reagan may have been doing the same. So I think the larger issues, you're right, energy is going to be a big debate point during this campaign. I think if you look at the overall economy, if you look at the last 2 years, 4.1 million private sector jobs, 25 straight months of private sector job growth. Many of the jobs that were lost over the course of the administration weren't due to regulation. That's something to keep in mind.
Ford, if you would allow me, I would say this. And Doug, I want to get your reaction. You have a president who consistently in polls, registered voters, and this the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, there's broad agreement on this point. Something like 40% of the electorate thinks that he's too liberal. Mm-hmm. And they attach that to him. And at a time of economic uncertainty, and the president himself said it in the Rolling Stone interview where he said, look, people quit caring about global warming because they couldn't find a job, and those attitudes are luxury attitudes that you can have if you have a good income. Should the president deal with this EPA guy, the crucifier? Should he fire him? Should he do something about the EPA to make a statement in Ohio, to make a statement in Michigan and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and say, I'm taking this seriously and I don't want any bad actors, I don't want any rogue agents?
Well, he has. In the last, I think in September, there was a smog rule that was supposed to go into effect, and he stopped that. He has approved a number of different drilling permits. So, I think that the key thing for the president, he's going to have to both balance his commitment to protecting the environment with sending a message to folks in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and other parts of the country where coal and oil are important. Let me just finish. Are important. And so that they're comfortable with his positions. Right now, I don't see that they're totally.
You got to fire him because basically people aren't. You said this yesterday. People think that the president isn't doing everything he can do, and this sort of statement, right or wrong, goes to that sort of notion in the mind of the American voter. And basically,
why not fire him?
Well, exactly.
Well, here's the thing. I actually don't agree with the fact that the public is blaming the president right now for high gas prices. I think there's blame going all around. No, they aren't. It depends on really what poll you look at, and it's not affecting his approval rating. I mean, if gas prices were lower, he might be at. Are we saying that he would be at 53? Because right now he's at 50.
I'm just telling you, if they felt that he was doing everything he could do, his numbers would be higher.
I don't think anyone thinks that people in Washington are doing everything they think.
That is accurate. The president, though. We will also stipulate, Internet, that you don't think we're doing a very good job here in town. We know that. That's why we try harder here on Power Play. Guys, stick around because we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the role of labor unions as we reach an inflection point in the battle between organized labor, the Republicans, Democrats, all of that good stuff. So stick around. Okay, I want to start with you, Ford, because you got the short end of the stick in the last segment. You were very good about that. Didn't the president kind of win out on this whole Boeing deal? Just looking at this narrowly, he got to please unions because the NLRB cracked Boeing in the snout. But there's the plane still rolling off the assembly line. There's Rich Edson down there soaking up the rays. So didn't the president get to please his base, but at the same time allow the process to prevail? Doesn't he win this?
Yes, and he needed to win this because essentially if we're headed for the very tight election we all think we are on the electoral map, it's going to be big labor that's going to push the president over the top. And that's why Mitt Romney really has to be cognizant of the role that big labor plays in this election, particularly in the states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and even Nevada to an extent. Mm-hmm. And what he has to do is not come out there and say, unions are goons, unions are bad. What he has to come out there and say is, this is about workers' choice. This is about whether workers want to join a union or they don't. And really, that's what he has to spin it as. And he has to be very careful of his rhetoric because if he doesn't, the unions are going to make Romney pay for it.
Doug, the NLRB has caused that Reagan guy that you mentioned before had a pretty good way. He was a former member of a labor union himself, and he had a pretty good way of talking to union workers about choice and about economic opportunity. But Doug, the NLRB, as our friend Rich Edson pointed out, is it's nobody knew about it. Now it's this political thorn, because these recess appointments and all of this stuff, in terms of how the president talks to, because remember, just as these union groups that Ford talked about in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, et cetera, in states like Virginia, in states like Colorado, it's not as cool to be big union friendly.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think the NLRB, like the EPA, some of these other agencies are in the news largely because Republicans have done a good job of elevating them and putting them in the news. I think the president, though, and I agree with Ford, I think that the challenge for Mitt Romney is obviously how he talks about unions. And I think that what you've seen over the last 5 months, 6 months, actually the last year, is that unions have actually got their mojo back to a large degree. I mean, for a little while, there was talk that maybe the effectiveness of unions was a thing of the past.
Right.
And you saw in Ohio with the referendum on collective bargaining. You saw in Wisconsin with the recall.
That was a tie.
You saw. Well, I mean, you saw in Wisconsin the referendum, the recall of the governor, and you saw in Pennsylvania with a couple Democrats, unions are really starting to flex their muscles. And I think it would just be a real mistake if the Romney campaign, went after working families and unions, because the president got 60% of union households, like in a very good environment. There's no I think that Romney's campaign would make a mistake if they continued this campaign. That is largely it would have been played in the primary campaign.
It's very disturbing to hear you guys in broad agreement here, but let's drill down on this a bit. The biggest issue that's going on in American labor right now is that private sector unions are kaput. They are basically
That's exactly right.
We're down to 12%, 13% of the private labor force being unionized. That for a long time the numbers held fairly steady. At a quarter to a third of the private sector was unionized, and they're headed for single digits, and they're headed for trouble. Meantime, public sector unions have boomed. It has been the level of organization, AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and other government worker unions have boomed. Shouldn't Romney, people don't like these government worker unions by and large, shouldn't Romney go after these folks?
He should, but he has to be very, very careful about it. As we're saying with Scott Walker, these guys are the best foot soldiers that the Democratic Party has. And President Obama has to do everything he can to keep them happy, or else they won't pull the lever for him. So Mitt Romney has to be very gentle about how he talks about it. But at the end of the day, we need to find a way to push these down, because it's only hurting America's bottom line.
All right, we'll let you have the second to last word. The last word goes to you, Internet. We'll tell you that Mock Tink says $3.50 gas, Mitt will win in a landslide. Probably right. And who are these 1 or 2% of folks who are never sure about anything? If you don't have an opinion, why vote on these things? And I will say this to you, Griffin 57. I'll say this to you. I've long been an advocate for less voting when it comes to the uninformed. If you don't have an opinion, don't just make a guess based on the person's last name. We thank you very much.
Or Obama rhetoric.
All right, gentlemen. You guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the Correspondents' Dinner weekend and all your brunching. And you...